Good morning and welcome to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Lyndon LaRouche became President of the United States. This video will be divided into three main parts. So first of all, we are going to discuss a little bit the background of who Lyndon LaRouche is, because most likely some people might not really know who he is, or they just have heard his name somewhere. Second part will be how we will put this scenario into place, and part 3 will be, of course, the implications, the most interesting parts of this video. So let's check who is Lyndon LaRouche. Lyndon LaRouche, he is a very controversial person. And we know that he was born in Rochester, New Hampshire. He was the oldest of the three children of Jessie Lenore and Lyndon H. LaRouche Sr. And we also know that Lyndon LaRouche, he was first apparently a Catholic, well, during his young age, when he was still a child, but then his parents, they became Quaker, and this had a huge impact because they didn't allow him to use any kind of violence whatsoever. So that meant when bullies were attacking him, hitting him, he was not allowed to hit them back. And it left him frustrated during all of his years. Another very interesting aspect, and something we should also maybe mention, is that he really liked the ideas of Leibniz, for instance. And of course later on he discovered Marxism, and he proclaimed himself to be a Marxist. But of course many people say, especially Marxists, they say that he was rather someone who had very fascistic tendencies. Well, overall we can just say that in OTL, Lyndon LaRouche is someone who self-identified as a left-wing person, but at the same time he had very unique ideas. So some of these unique ideas that he got was, for instance, that he was totally in favor of fusion energy and the civil use of nuclear energy. So in there he was very much on the other side as most leftists at those times. And also he had, of course, this tendency to blame everything on the British Empire, on the Club of Rome, and you know, very unique ideas, I would say. And everyone should have their own ideas, but then again we have to check how we can put all his ideas into this scenario. So one important part is probably the fusion energy that he also supported in OTL, the SDE, exactly, the SDE. That's something that he was totally supporting. And also, of course, he had this idea of having a very different Bretton Woods system, which would have, again, very unique implications for the economy. Now, how do we put this off? How do we get Lyndon LaRouche as President of the United States? There is a very important detail where one of his friends, called Don Merrill, read the book The French Turn, which was written by Trotsky. And this friend would then convince Lyndon LaRouche that, you know, if you found your own party, you will never be elected as president. And maybe Lyndon LaRouche might take this as a good idea. He would then think, okay, if I cannot actually win with my own party, then I will just enter one that suits me the best. And in a way he did that, but much later, which actually was, in the strategic point of view, really bad. So what happens later on? Later on, he would try to somehow hide a little bit his too radical beliefs, thinking that it might shock, first of all, the Democratic Party, which he would thus join in 1948. And he would use his organizational skills and also, of course, his intellect to help to write the program or the speeches, for instance, to give metaphors. He would have certainly a very good capacity doing so, because he's a very well-read man. And he would prove himself to be someone who could actually have a very good impact, organizationally speaking, for the Democratic Party. Later on, of course, he would then have to divorce from his wife, as he did in OTL, and this would be done in the 60s, which would help him to have more time and to also put himself much more into politics. He would manage elections in 1964, and he actually could also become a representative of the United States until one point where he would be elected as a Secretary of Labor by President Jimmy Carter in 1977. So he would serve in that position until 1981, and from there on, I would say, or he might choose to become a senator, which would be a very good thing for him, or he might choose to not to fortify, but he might choose to become someone more outspoken as a representative, and he could probably make some more dramatic campaigns, which might alienate some of the Democratic Party, but then again, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, they are a very, they have people with many beliefs, many ideologies within them, even if they dislike them or not, and thus I think it might not become a problem. Now I think the election where he would have a very good chance would be in 1988, because first of all, after 2 terms of Republican rule under Reagan, it might be good for the US citizens to have again a Democratic candidate. So Lyndon LaRouche, who already proved himself to be a good person, but also who changed a little bit the dynamic of the Democratic Party, he would become a person somehow as Donald Trump, that he would attract the attention, that people would speak about him, and that he somehow would come with ideas that would sound at first very ridiculous or very imposing, but he would manage that the public, they would speak about it. In OTL, he managed to make a 30-minute, I think, was it publicity or so, on the television, which he acquired for, I think, $500,000 US. So, taking this as an information, I'm very sure that Lyndon LaRouche might somehow become a very interesting person in the eyes of the voters, and thus he might become a president of the United States. Now, as for the implications, there are many implications, I can tell you. The world would be very different with President Lyndon LaRouche. President LaRouche might change many policies which the US would have had during the Cold War. Now we have to think of it that in 1988 and 1989 there was still the Cold War ongoing. And of course, with a Cold War, you have still this fight between communism and capitalism. Now, of course, LaRouche is not someone who is capitalistic per se, but at the same time, he's also not very much of a communist. And because he was hiding a little bit his political beliefs, he would still have a very difficult time to come out of the closet, let's say, and he would make very small steps. Now, one of the smaller steps that he would be doing is he might probably be someone who would continue the defense policies of Reagan. So everything that is out of space, and especially laser technology, he would continue it. He might come back to the Soviet Union and offer them to share the technology, but then again the Soviet Union would probably refuse because of pride and also because they had very other things they needed to do. And thus LaRouche, he would focus a lot in laser technology. In fact, he would invest a substantial part of money in laser technology, but also in fusion energy as well as nuclear energy. With President LaRouche, we can imagine that the enemies of nuclear power, they would have a very, very difficult time to actually impose themselves. Maybe in Europe, first of all, they might still have a very big public and an audience who would follow them. As for the US, they might still be very different about it. Also, the LaRouche movement, they are very much critical of global, not global exchange, but global warming, which means that LaRouche as a president, he would not really care of the environmental impacts. Maybe on a very, on a very little part he would care, because of course you cannot just destroy everything and it would give him a very bad image, but he would try to hide it as good as possible and still not really try to care so much as possible. LaRouche, he would be a stronger ally of the People's Republic of China. And that's for a huge reason. He is someone who in OTL was very much he was very much favorable of a Silk Road, a new Silk Road. And I'm sure that a political climate where you still have the Soviet Union as your main enemy and the People's Republic of China who is still competing against the Soviet Union, it would be a very good deal for the US to support a new Silk Road in the idea of LaRouche. Taiwan would be very isolated, and we can just speculate what would happen later on. LaRouche, he would also enforce various economic reforms, and they would have huge impacts globally on many, many markets. He wanted to have a similar system as a Bretton Woods system, and as you might know, the Bretton Woods system was something where gold became a standard, but also which made the dollar as the most important currency of the world. It should become the world reserve currency in a way. And I believe that someone like Lyndon LaRouche, he would still prefer, of course, to have, since he's the president of the United States, to have somewhat of a dominance in there, but he would be someone also who would like to back it up with gold. So we might see a substantial increase in, or not in price, but at least in demand for gold, which would lead in many different economic perspectives. Now, the second thing, I believe, especially in foreign policies, might be this one. When the USSR is falling apart, Lyndon LaRouche might not really care what would happen in Eastern Europe, especially in Western Europe as well. So, probably no German unification. Probably also he might think, oh great, now the Warsaw Pact doesn't exist, let's dissolve NATO. He would be someone who might focus on the US and focus on bigger scale projects, but at the same time, when you're having an army that you need to keep up everywhere and you're playing the world police, of course it will take a big part of your money. And also because the campaign in 1988, in there was a main point about the budget deficit, and he could probably not miss this opportunity to somehow save money and even so focus on bigger projects like the laser technology, fusion energy, and many things which again would make the US some of the most advanced country in the world and thus give some other kind of prestige. Now, I think we will leave it in here. I will make maybe a second video of other implications that will happen, how the world will change with a President LaRouche, also how the LaRouche movement might gain access in other countries. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and see you next time on Planet Althistory. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Althistory.